You want the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
You can't handle the truth!
Well, we're giving you the Michigan Sports Truth, the show that reveals facts, truth, research, and statistics and never messes around. With your hosts, Taylor Phillips, Ed Smith, Frank Vashner, and Buck Geno. We lay down the entire truth about everything regarding your Detroit and Michigan sports teams, no matter how uncomfortable they may be. No junk, no entertainment, no homerism, no coddling, no pop culture, no opinions, no shilling, and no fluff. Follow me, Taylor Phillips, on Twitter at DT2Phillips with 2 L's. Follow Ed Smith on Twitter at EdSmith313. Follow Frank Vashner at Frank_Vashner, VAJCNER. And follow Buck Geno on Twitter at BuckGeno3rd. Also like our Facebook page, The Michigan Sports Truth, and join our Facebook group with the same name. The hosts of the Michigan Sports Truth podcast do not take any suggestions or criticism from any member of its audience on how it should be run. It is up to the host to decide what they want to cover. They also do not intend to be any amount of popular in any way, shape, form, or fashion. Additionally, the views of the audience, right or wrong, do not reflect the actual truth revealed on this program.
Episode 291 of the Week in Review is in session. Taylor Phillips and Buck Geno, welcome back to the Week in Review edition. Buck, follow Buck Geno on Twitter at BuckGeno3rd. Buck Geno, let's lift off with this college football recap. Let's get to the Michigan Wolverines Wisconsin Badgers game first of all.
Touchdown, Michigan!
They lost 24-10. They had a touchdown reverse caught by Donovan Peoples-Jones, and still would have lost mathematically. But the biggest issue here, they lose Brandon Peters when he takes a vicious hit from Andrew Van Ginkel, one of Wisconsin's linebackers, and Brandon Peters suffers brain damage. And then moments later, Graham Couch of the Lansing State Journal added insult to injury on Twitter, tweeting, "If he's okay, there's a good joke about having his head examined and not finding anything."
Right out of hell.
Are you out of your mind?
That's when Twitter blew up.
What is that?
You're crazy! You're crazy! Crazy! Are you crazy?
Kind of got pushed to the wayside. Michigan was in the game in the first half, actually played a pretty decent first half, had a touchdown that was taken away erroneously, and then they fumbled on the next play. So they lost all of the points they could have gotten in that drive, and that was a big swing of momentum. But Wisconsin is the better team, and they came to play, and they proved that in the game. The one thing I was really impressed with Michigan was defensively, but that was in the first half. And then when Peters got knocked out, you could definitely tell that because the offense went right back to being ineffective, the defense shouldered the load and was unable to do what they've done in games past, and that stopped the run. So overall, I think that the result was probably something that most people would have expected. I mean, if you watch enough football, you thought that Michigan could stay in the game, and you thought that they maybe had a puncher's chance, but all that left with Brandon Peters being wheeled off the field. And when John McCorn came in, this is pretty much a matter of the inevitable happening, which was Wisconsin pulling away slowly, working the clock, and then defensively just locking down on what really was an impotent and ineffective Michigan offense from that point. So that being said about the game, you're talking about the now infamous tweet from Lansing State Journal columnist Graham Couch. There's a lot of thoughts. A lot of people think that, depending on what side you fall on, that he was out of line, that he was deliberately trying to incite Michigan fans. I don't think he was deliberately trying to do anything. Number one, I don't give him enough credit for that because I don't think he's very good. Number two, it was done in poor taste, not only because of the time that it was done, but because of the instance surrounding Peter's injury. I mean, it was a serious injury to him, and something where, he maybe, we knew that he was going to be okay from the get-go, maybe it would have been something that he could have gotten away with. But Peters was on the ground for at least 5 minutes before they finally were able to get him off the field, and actually upright, and then get prepared to get him off the field. I mean, they wheelchaired him to an ambulance, for Pete's sake. So it was done in poor taste, but I think really what happened, and where he probably cemented what he's been now getting from a lot of people in terms of lashback, is the fact that he was unapologetic in his apology. When you do something that you're not supposed to do, a heartfelt apology is probably is the only thing that you really can do to make it right at that point. And he didn't do that even. He couldn't even bring himself to do that. And this is not the first time that he's done something like this and received some backlash from not only people that support Michigan, but just other journalists in general. If you remember the plane incident that Michigan's basketball team had before the Big Ten championship, he made a crass tweet about that. And Tony Paul from the Detroit News called him out on it, and they had their little Twitter fisticuffs, if you will call it. But when you're talking about somebody like Tony Paul, who I think is a very good journalist and
he is.
good read out of the Detroit News, bashing on somebody that's working for what essentially is a local paper, then you've got a problem. And I think that overall, for Graham Couch to come out and say that was wrong, but for him to be almost without remorse and call out the people that were giving it back to him on Twitter as being triggered or having tribal outrage, that's not the case. You're making light of a situation that doesn't need to be made light of. If Brian Lewerke were to go down with a major concussion, I doubt that Chris Ballas or Nick Baumgartner, who write for, or I should say write about the Wolverines on a daily basis, would be tweeting out something like that. And it just shows the level of, I guess the lack of, I should say, awareness and really just of tone deaf, as the best way I can say it. The lack of awareness, he's tone deaf to how that comes across. And I also find it somewhat puzzling that there weren't more people on the other side of the ledger, they being Michigan State fans or Michigan State supporters, that were reluctant to put Graham Couch under the wheels of the bus, because I can tell you that the shoe been on the other foot, the outrage would have been just as stronger. So I'm really going to cap this off by just saying that it was classless. It wasn't necessary. And for somebody that calls themselves a journalist, I thought that it was a pretty blatant attempt at humor at the expense of somebody that plays for what you would consider a rival team for the paper that he works for, the Lansing State Journal. And whether or not discipline is going to be handed out remains to be seen. But this is not new from him, and I don't think that we're going to see the end of that. I think that as long as he's employed by the Lansing State Journal, we'll continue to see this level of idiocy. And you can do yourself a favor and just not read him. And that's really the best way that you can battle back against somebody that wants to do that stuff, is you cut into the bottom line. Then that's when people pay attention. So that said, I think it'll be something that will wash over relatively quickly as Michigan turns their attention to Ohio State. But boy, it was just a really poorly executed attempt at humor during a situation that there was none.
Yeah, and you pointed out in Facebook messages that the Lansing State Journal is not going to do anything, kind of like the way the Detroit Free Press is not going to do anything about the Drew Sharp plagiarism thing, like 2 years ago, almost 2 full years ago. And this is why at least Drew Sharp got fired from what was Detroit Sports 105.1, which then last year changed formats. But this Graham Couch thing, now, yesterday, or probably 3 hours later, he apologized for the tweet, but he threatened to accuse the reacting fans, the reacting people on Twitter, of malice, which scares the hell out of public figures like me. And that's an example of why I blocked him.
Yeah, I mean, well, when you talk about people that are that thin-skinned, I mean, if they're going to take blowback from what they say and try to use it against you, it just shows how small of the people they really are. Again, back to the criticism of him. When you do that, when you do that kind of stuff, it exposes you to that. And for him to come back and say, well, I'm going to do something to you, or I'm going to expose everybody that's backlashing against me, well, maybe you should look at why they're doing it. And again, it goes to show how really small-minded he is, not knowing the gravity of what he's done, or refusing to acknowledge it, even though he does know, for a point of personal pride, so that he can say that he didn't back down.
Yeah, and we're not accusing Graham Couch of malice or anything, because he was trying to make a joke, but you can't make any type of joke about a serious injury. That's the point, because that still does add insult to injury, regardless.
Right. I mean, when Brian Lewerke broke his leg against Michigan 2 seasons ago, do you think that any of the Michigan columnists were tweeting out random funny comments about that? No, they weren't.
Not even Bob Warnowski.
I mean, it's an injury. And I think that I go back to even the Shane Morris thing, where more people were mad at Brady Hoke for putting him back into the game, and rightly so. They weren't mad at Shane Morris for being concussed. They weren't trying to make a joke about him being concussed. They were trying to make a joke, and rightly so, of the fact that the Michigan football staff handled that rather poorly. So that's one thing. But to bring the actual injured player into your realm of humor, it just isn't going to work. And it was a pretty poorly timed, poorly worded tweet by him, and then to defend it further by saying that everybody's out to get him, or people are, banding together in tribalism. That stuff just basically says to me that he doesn't want to admit that he was wrong, because even though he apologized, he didn't really apologize. He just said, well, I'm sorry that offended Brandon Peters, or I didn't mean to do that, but everybody that's telling me that I shouldn't have tweeted it can go to hell. Well, what are you really apologizing for? Because you're not really telling me that you're sorry that you did it. Because if you were sorry that you did it, you would have taken it down, you would have retracted it, and then you would have said that you truly were sorry and it shouldn't have come out. Instead, he won't do that. He hasn't backed down from it. And it just, again, it goes to show that he just doesn't get it. And it's unfortunate, but we move on because I really don't take his takes for anything more than what they're worth, which is barely enough time to pass through them on my Twitter timeline. Yeah.
And Graham Couch still hasn't deleted his tweet.
No, he won't. The only reason he would is somebody told him that if he doesn't take it down, he won't have a job. And that probably won't happen. So it's just going to sit out there, and if there's not much else you can do other than, if you don't really like it, don't give the LSG any money. Don't click on their stuff. Don't go to their sites. Don't do anything with them. And if you support that, then they're going to see it soon enough in the bottom line, and they'll have to react accordingly.
Yeah, and even if Graham Couch did delete his tweet, a lot of people, one of them I caught, still took a screenshot of that tweet. Still would still take a screenshot of that tweet and then reported to the Lansing State Journal. Even if the Lansing State Journal is not going to do anything about that, or so, people still have to. People have a right to report that in their own way, and I give them credit because Graham Couch continues to be a piece of shit again, and Jeff Moss, the founder and editor-in-chief of the Detroit Sports Rag, published an article headlining "Graham Couch is an ignorant, unfunny C-word." He showed his ass again on Twitter.
Yeah, well, he did. I mean, he certainly did. And like I said, I mean, it took away from everything that you wanted to think about the game, and it diminished what happened at the game, which is a serious injury to Michigan's quarterback. And we're talking more about that than we're talking about how Michigan, again, in a big game, failed to come up with a good effort overall. We're talking about somebody else that now has the attention to themselves because they made a stupid tweet. So, for me, I think that I'd rather talk about why Michigan didn't play as well in the second half, why Michigan couldn't beat another team that is ranked above them, why Michigan, now going into the game against Ohio State, really has a conundrum at quarterback on their hands because there are reports that Wilton Spade has been medically cleared, even though that they were talking about him being out for the season. I thought that he was going to be out for the season, but people are saying that he could be medically cleared this week to play against Ohio State, which may not be the best thing. Having a guy come in as rusty as Wilton will be coming off a major injury, and especially coming off a major injury that, if re-aggravated, could jeopardize the rest of his football career. So that's what should be the focal point of the talk, not some idiot from Lansing talking about how I'm going to try and make a joke out of this because he plays for Michigan. So that's the kind of stuff that needs to be talked about, not his buffoonery.
Yeah, and even Prashant Iyer reacted, "This is in very poor taste regardless of his status. I have no idea why you'd consider making a joke about someone who took a hit so serious that it required medical attention." And then there's more from Graham Couch. He quoted his own tweet. It's a famous Dizzy Dean quote. That was back in 1934, by the way. Relax. He tells them to relax, and then he replies to Duncan Smith at Duncan Smith NBA. "Screw optics. People are overly sensitive and angry and looking for a fight. No way around that."
There is one way around it. Don't make this dumb tweet. Don't make the stupid mistake of trying to make a joke about somebody getting hurt. Like I said, shoe on the other foot. I guarantee you that there would be outrage and a reaction from that side of the ledger. And I just don't think that right now, if you're Michigan State fans, you kind of have to distance yourself from that. And like I said, the best way to combat that kind of stuff is to not go there, to not read it. That's the kind of stuff that needs to happen.
Uh-huh. And then Mike Mulholland at MULHO2MJ. Mike Mulholland is a sports photographer that covers all Michigan sports teams. Tweeted the following: "He was wheeled to the locker room. He walked to the ambulance from the locker room. He seemed completely out when I was shooting photos of him on the field. Wisconsin staff called the hospital letting him know that he's coming in for a head injury." And then he tweeted again with a photo of Brandon Peters being carted in a wheelchair. "His father came down immediately. I think his mother was there too, but didn't see her. Andrew Van Ginkel, the Wisconsin linebacker who hit him, called for medics immediately after after the hit and seeing Peters on the ground. See, Van Ginkel's got class and Graham Couch doesn't. And if you're into photos, here you go. Here's the link.
Well, and the other thing with Mike Mulholland is he took some heat as well because he posted that picture. You had people saying that he's invading Peters' privacy and that he shouldn't be taking pictures of that. Well, what do you expect him to do? He didn't stop Peters for an interview. He didn't impede any medical progress that was medical treatment that was progressing. He took a photo of a guy who got hurt in a wheelchair, and that kind of stuff happens all the time. People take pictures of injured players, and just because Bolton Spate didn't have his picture taken when he was going to the hospital, he took a picture, is what Nick Mulholland did. And I think that people were unfairly criticizing him because they felt that he should have stayed away and he shouldn't have taken that picture. Well, again, he wasn't asking Peters questions. He wasn't holding them up so that he could get a shot. He just took a picture from where he was stationed and went about the rest of his day and did his job. So that's the kind of stuff that baffles me, is the same people that think Graham Couch's tweet was harmless would be talking about Mulholland's picture as if he prevented Peters from getting medical treatment. It's mind-boggling, and like I said, it's something that is taking away from the analysis of the game, and I just don't think that those two instances are even close to being the same in terms of impact.
Yeah, and Mike Mulholland was trying to do legitimate coverage, and he wasn't trying to go out of line.
No, he did his job. He took pictures. That's what he's paid to do.
Yeah.
What did you want him to do? I mean, again, it's people saying, well, what I want to see, but I don't want to hear any other viewpoints. And it's people being closed-minded and arbitrarily angered by things that they feel that shouldn't have happened. But when you talk about somebody that's going over the line, it's definitely Graham Couch. Mike Mulholland took a couple of snapshots of Peters being wheeled off the field, and that was it. So for people to criticize him is ludicrous.
Yeah. And there were some, and like you pointed out, there were some people that criticized Mike Mulholland, which they don't have a right to, because he's not doing anything wrong. But for Graham Couch, back to the people are sensitive reply to Duncan Smith. The only sensitive person in this case is Graham Couch, the guy who can't take criticism after delivering insult to injury on Twitter in the first place, and then threatening people who react for malice. Is just childish, unprofessional, classless, and just plain fucking stupid. And for the Lansing State Journal to not do jack shit about it is beyond me. Just like the Detroit Free Press, typically not holding anybody, never holding anybody accountable, because they're fucking lazy, and the Lansing State Journal's fucking lazy too.
Right. Well, there are plenty of people that work for the LSJ that are good writers, and there are plenty of guys. There are plenty of guys that I would like to read when you're talking about Michigan State, but Graham Couch isn't one of them, and I just think that for him to go away would be the nicest thing to happen, but I just don't think it's going to happen. The only thing that I can do now is, again, you just stay away from that, and hopefully that makes an impact as more people would tend to do that if they feel that Graham Couch is out of line.
Yeah, all Graham Couch has to do is delete his tweet. Just for his own sake, personally. Just a little persuasion to Graham Couch himself. But for the Michigan Wolverines, they don't have a quarterback now, except they have the lowly Geno who's not injured. Wilton Spate's still not ready for contact. Brandon Peters is already out. They're going to have to deal with Geno at least when they head back home for the game against the Ohio State Buckeyes Saturday at noon on Fox.
Yeah, I think that Brandon Peters probably, again, when you talk about Michigan's offense, he gave him a puncher's chance. He wasn't perfect. He made some mistakes, as a redshirt freshman will do. But he gave them another dimension to the offense. To have him out and perhaps have John O'Corn coming back in, it really spells doom for any chance that Michigan had. Not that Brandon Peters would have been able to take them to victory, but now with John O'Corn back at the helm, what appears to be at least the only option for them at this point for Michigan, it's really going to be a tough sled for them against Ohio State, who, after playing their worst game against Iowa, has been on point since then in their last two victories, scoring 48 and 52 points. So, they've given up not much to Michigan State or Illinois. Illinois is terrible, but that's still, they're playing for a purpose, and now that they're cemented into the Big Ten championship game against Wisconsin, I think that the motivation for them is just to destroy anybody in their path, and unfortunately for Michigan, they're the last team in the regular season that's going to face that fate.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And let me point out the truth here. Ohio State, whichever Michigan quarterback is available to play, Ohio State is still the better team than Michigan. Ohio State is now, I believe, ranked 8th in the AP poll now. Yeah, that's why I remember. They're 8th ranked. Michigan is out of the top 25. I get it, they're at home, but Ohio State's still going to win. And we're gonna pick the score that Ohio State is going to win by in our college football in the Mitten Quick Picks segment just a little while. But transitioning to the Michigan State Spartans, speaking of which,
Touchdown, MSU!
They just barely beat the Maryland Terrapins 17-7. They scored 2 early touchdowns, but then struggled mightily offensively the rest of the game. They just barely got a field goal off late in the fourth quarter. Maryland tried to make a comeback by scoring a touchdown, and then when they looked like they were going to hit a chip shot field goal to bring it to within 7 with over 3 minutes to go, they slice it wide right and miss it to keep it a 10-point game, a 2-score game, and Michigan State on offense gets the first down and then runs out the clock. No wonder they're the Maryland Derps. Because they're bad.
They're not any good. They're on their 4th quarterback of the season, and nobody expected Maryland to really compete in that game against Michigan State. They somehow did, by virtue of the fact that they lost by 10 points, but the game wasn't really that close. I think that for Michigan State, offensively, probably one of their worst performances of the year. The weather had a lot to do with it, obviously, because of the fact that it was snowing and raining. The footing wasn't great. Brian Lewerke really didn't try to open up the pass game after the first half. He only went 2 of 14 for the entire game, which tells you how ineffective Michigan State's passing game was. And they really relied on L.J. Scott and the rest of their running backs heavily to get some offense going. They weren't able to get much, but they were able to get enough against the Maryland defense that played valiantly, but at the same time just couldn't do enough to get the win. Maryland's defense would have had to score some points, I think, for them to make any sort of noise against Michigan State. As you mentioned, they scored a touchdown in the last quarter, didn't get the field goal, and then Michigan State runs out the clock. So Michigan State does escape partially by getting that victory. But when you look at the stats, Maryland didn't even get 100 yards rushing. Bortenschlager was only 13 of 25 for 121 yards. Didn't throw a pick, but didn't throw a touchdown either. And Maryland's offense was pretty much impotent throughout the entire game. And Michigan State, like I said, they relied heavily on the run game. They had 51 total rushing attempts. Now, 2 of those were kneel down. So you look at it, they had 49 real rushing attempts for 275 yards. So L.J. Scott leading the way, but Gerald Holmes and also Brian Lewerke on the ground was the main focus of that attack. And in the conditions that they were in, it stood to reason. They were up. They didn't really have any motivation to try to open up the passing game. But 2 of 14 from Lewerke, boy, it was a tough sled for him. Didn't have a great game, but with Maryland having the offense that they did, which was none, he wasn't really under any heat to perform better.
No, absolutely not. Spartans wrap up their season at home against Rutgers. That's Saturday at a time to be determined and a channel to be determined. We'll find out.
Yeah, I would imagine it's probably I'm thinking it's going to be a Big Ten Network game.
Yeah.
Actually, they actually released that today. Dude, I take that back. They'll be on Fox again, playing at Rutgers, which is, I guess, if you're Fox, you try to find the best teams possible. Well, Michigan, Ohio State are playing at noon, and with all the other games that are going on, Michigan State having an 8-3 record is sort of appealing to them, I guess. But they'll be playing Rutgers in what should amount to a glorified scrimmage. And Michigan State, I can't imagine, will do anything but win that football game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's gonna be tough for Rutgers. MSU is gonna handle them well, even in inclement weather conditions. You just gotta hang on to the damn ball. That's all.
Yeah, and that's what Michigan State was able to do.
Except for Gerald Holmes.
Right. I mean, they didn't. Lewerke, again, with 2 of 14, no picks, which is probably is the best thing you can say about his game, that he didn't throw a pick. But other than that, there wasn't much to be had. And when you run the ball 49 times and get 275 yards, you're not going to go away from that.
No, absolutely not. So still a time to be determined, but it's going to be on Fox.
Yes. Should be the 4 o'clock game because Michigan, Ohio State is obviously on at noon.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't imagine they're going to want to put that game on at night, so probably a 3:30 or 4 o'clock kickoff for that one.
Yeah, probably 4 o'clock, we'll guess. Then you got the Central Michigan Chippewas,
Central Michigan,
who take good care of the Kent State Golden Flashes on the road at Kent, Ohio, 42-23. Kent State tried to make a comeback. Central Michigan nicely pulled away. Their defense was kind of off, but then they sealed it. Their offense helped them pull away. Shane Morris, Corey Willis, they provided plenty of offense throughout the entire game.
Well, it's a road game for Central, so we expect them to play well. For some reason, they play better on the road than they do at home. And they went to Kent, Ohio, and soundly defeated the Golden Flashes. Like you said, they tried to make a little bit of a comeback, but Central had 2 touchdowns in the last quarter to thwart that comeback. They got to 28-23. Did Kent State with a couple of touchdowns, one late in the second quarter. There was no scoring in the third, and then fourth quarter they punched one in, but failed on the 2-point conversion. And then from that point, Central Michigan took control. Shane Morris hitting Corey Willis with a 53-yard touchdown pass, and then Romello Ross capping it off with a 2-yard touchdown run late in the game. So Kent State hung in there, but I think that Central Michigan, the big play of the game for them was the 98-yard touchdown kickoff return by Jared Davis. Kent State went up 3-0 early, and then on the ensuing kickoff, Central Michigan returns the kickoff for a touchdown, and then started out from there with 2 other touchdowns to go up 21-3. And at that point, Kent State was trying to keep their head above water, and they just couldn't do it.
Central Michigan will play at home on Black Friday when I'm in Detroit at Ford Field, calling the Ithaca Yellow Jackets Division 6 state championship game against the Jackson Lumen Christie Titans Friday at 4:30. Chips play at Kelly Short Stadium against the Northern Illinois Huskies Friday at a time to be determined. To wrap up their regular season, they're bowl eligible, and so are the Western Michigan Broncos, who lost at the Northern Illinois Huskies 35-31. It was a really good, very tense slugfest. It just came down to that final play, and Northern Illinois seemed to get the game-winning touchdown. They were just the slightly better team than Western Michigan.
Yeah, I think Western played a really good football game, but defensively they just failed a little bit. They gave up 35 points, usually 31. When you have a ground-heavy attack like Western Michigan does, will do just fine. But the defense didn't come to play against Northern Illinois. Northern Illinois scores 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter, and they end up winning that football game. So Western Michigan sinks to 6-5, and they will also end their regular season, next week. And they will play Toledo on Friday at 11:30 a.m. And that should be an interesting game, simply because Toledo at this point now, with Northern Illinois winning against Western. If you look at the MAC standings, really Toledo at this point can't do a whole lot except for hope that Northern Illinois loses their season finale. Because right now, if you look at the MAC standings in the divisions, Toledo is 6-1 behind Northern Illinois, because Northern Illinois right now holds the tiebreaker.
Western Michigan goes to Toledo and plays the Rockets Friday at 11:30 a.m. on ESPNU. I'm going to record every college football game in the Mitten on Friday. I'm going to set it all to record on my Dish HD DVR just to break everything down. I'm not going to. Unfortunately, I'm not going to do get home in time to do a post game on Talk Shoe, because I'm going to arrive home very, very damn late. So I'm probably going to do a Facebook Live on the Michigan Sports Truth Facebook page.
Yeah, and I do want to correct myself. Toledo actually beat Northern Illinois. I had those scores flipped. So Toledo was hoping that Western could beat Northern Illinois, and that didn't happen. So now what Toledo has to do is they have to beat Western, and they have to hope that Northern Illinois loses to Central. So they kind of flip-flop allegiances there now, as they'll be rooting for Central Michigan, and then they also have to take care of business against Western at home. So those 2 games kicking off within a half hour of each other, so there will be some definite scoreboard watching by both teams.
Yeah, definitely. And then you get the lowball teams, the Eastern Michigan Eagles finally winning on the road, 27-24 at the Miami, Ohio Redhawks. That was a close one as well. Brogan Roback and Paul Fricano did a much better job. Fricano was perfect in field goals and extra points. Eastern was just able to hang on.
Yeah, and that's what they did. Defensively, they locked it down in the second half. They gave up 17 in the second quarter. Other than that, 1 touchdown late in the fourth quarter, but it wasn't enough, and Eastern Michigan comes away with the victory, and they will indeed end their season, because they are not going to be bowl eligible against Bowling Green, and that game is on Tuesday.
Oh, yeah. Tuesday at 7. Senior day at EMU at Renderson Stadium against the Bowling Green Falcons. That's why we're doing this podcast Sundays at 10 from here forward, especially at a time like this. So that leads us to the college football in the Mitten Quick Picks.
Got a prediction? Then we welcome you to the college football in the Mitten Quick Picks.
Starting off with the number 8 Ohio State Buckeyes at Michigan Wolverines Saturday at noon on Fox. I'm going to predict Ohio State 42, Michigan 13. John O'Korn's going to have a tough time. He's going to be the starting quarterback, and Michigan's defense is going to have trouble like they did against Ohio State. I probably change the prediction to 34-13. Michigan's defense probably going to show a little bit of defense, but still very little, way too little against the Buckeyes' heavy offense.
Well, it doesn't really matter who's going to be the starting quarterback. We know it's not going to be Brandon Peters. So
No.
whether it be John O'Korn or by some miracle Wilton Speight, the offense is just not going to be there for them. So their only hope is turned into some sort of defensive struggle. And when your offense can't move, that becomes a hard task for you. So looking at how this game is going to go, Ohio State the last 2 weeks offensively has just been lights out. And they've undressed a couple of teams here in the Big Ten. The one thing that I think that Michigan could hang its head on is that their defense, even though they've shown some cracks, they very well could get a turnover and turn that into points. That is still something that Michigan has been able to do this season, but I just don't think it's going to be quite nearly enough. I'm going to go with Ohio State 45, and I'm going to go with Michigan 10.
I'm going to change my prediction back to 42-13 because again, the heavy offense is going to overmatch Michigan's defense, which has been trending down a little bit this season after last season when they busted their tail and did their job at Columbus and understandably got jobbed on that 4th and 1 spot last year. But still, they turned the ball over and gave Ohio State 14 points last year. They should not have let Ohio State come back in last year's game. Michigan probably is going to at least look for some redemption, but they're still going to get overpowered. 42-13, 45-10 was your prediction. Was that right?
Right.
Okay. Then you got the Rutgers Scarlet Knights and the number 21 Michigan State Spartans. Yes, the Spartans have moved back up to the top 25 at 21. Saturday at probably 4 on Fox.
Yeah, this is a tough one because you have a Michigan State team going in now. They're 8-3, and they don't have a ton to play for except for when you look at who's going to get invited to what bowl by virtue of record, and also something I've talked about a lot with some people over the last couple of weeks. Michigan at 8-4, Michigan State at 9-3. Michigan's going to bring a lot more fans typically to a bowl game, especially if it's in Florida. So bowls look at that more than they really do records. So if you're Michigan State, you're just hoping to get to 9-3 and then see where the bowls kind of fall. They're not going to be in the Big Ten championship game, but for them to have beaten Penn State, that will help them a little bit because they should be second in the division after next week. So that will help them a little bit. But this is the type of game where Michigan State doesn't really have to extend itself because their fate is largely sealed as far as bowls go. Just depends on where everybody falls. So I think that Michigan State is going to win this game. They're probably going to do the same type of thing that they did against Maryland, which is play ball control the clock. Rutgers is a far less superior team than Maryland was, and I think that they'll probably win handily, but I just don't see them really running out the score and being explosive. So I'm going to go with Michigan State winning this game on Saturday, 38-7.
Yep, Rutgers stinks. I'm going to go with Michigan State 35-6. Rutgers can't even score a touchdown, especially on the road. Then you got the Northern Illinois Huskies at the Central Michigan Chippewas. Chippewas' last home game, they just barely survived a comeback against the Eastern Michigan Eagles, and they finished it 40-24. Amari Coleman with a pick six. The week before, they took care of Kent State on the road. They're playing a much better team in Northern Illinois than they did Eastern Michigan and Kent State. They're playing Northern Illinois like they played Miami, Ohio, at home. Miami, Ohio is not even as good as Northern Illinois, and CMU lost 31-14 to Miami, Ohio earlier this season, and that's a bad showing for the Chippewas at Kelly Short Stadium. And Northern Illinois is going to try to finish strong against CMU on the road.
Well, the one thing they have is that Northern Illinois is going to be coming to play on a Friday. It's going to be a 12 o'clock kick, which is 11 o'clock local time for them. And for them to come in, they have to take care of business. They're going to have to win that game if they want any shot of making the MAC championship game. They also have to hope that Western helps them out a little bit and beats Toledo. But looking at this game, Central Michigan has not played well at home. They skated by Eastern, and Toledo destroyed them at home. Miami of Ohio beat them at home. They barely beat Rhode Island at home in their home opener. Not a ton of home games this year for Central, but when they've had them, they haven't really impressed. And I just don't think that really equates to much success against a superior Northern Illinois team. I'm going to go with the Huskies 27 and Central 17.
I'm going to go Northern Illinois 34 and Central Michigan 13 because the Huskies are going to keep proving that they're one of the top two teams in the MAC West. Then you got the Western Michigan. Yep.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because the two best teams in the MAC are in the same division. And really the MAC championship game should be Toledo and Northern Illinois again, but obviously that's not how it's going to work out.
No.
And regardless of who comes out of the MAC least, it's going to be somebody that doesn't want to have anything to do with either Toledo or Northern Illinois. So I think that if you're looking at this game from the MAC East perspective, I mean, right now, Akron and Ohio tied at 5-2. I think that probably your best bet for a victory at that point would be Akron, just by the way that they're playing lately. But Ohio having the better record overall at 8-3. So either way, I don't think that the MAC championship game really is going to be indicative of how the conference is laid out, simply because the two best teams, and maybe even the three best teams, if you're looking at conference record, are housed in the MAC West.
It's all gonna come down to the tiebreaker and who will move on to Ford Field and play for the MAC championship. Then you got the Bowling Green Falcons and the Eastern Michigan Eagles Tuesday at 7. I'm gonna go with Eastern 20 and Bowling Green 17.
Well, it's the last game of the regular season for both teams. Both teams not moving on to bowls, so those type of games tend to lend themselves a little bit more wide open. Both coaches, knowing that this is the last game that they'll play on the season, the playbooks kind of get thrown out, and they just try to do is whatever they can, because in your last game, the last thing you want to do is leave something on the table. So it should be an interesting game. I think Eastern's defense, though, will be the key as well. And I just don't see a lot from Bowling Green offensively for the times that I've seen them this year. So I'm going to go with Eastern 24 and Bowling Green 14.
That's the college football in the Mitten quick pick segment. Anyone have a prediction? Post it in the comment bank below this episode. Now let's transition to pro football.
Touchdown, Detroit Lions!
The Lions win 27-24 at the Chicago Bears at Soldier Field. Matt Prater nails a 52-yard field goal with 1:40 left. The Bears moved down the field because of the lack of defense the Lions were showing in the end, and then they miss a field goal, and the line on second down, and the Lions get the ball back automatically by NFL rules. And with 3 seconds left, Stafford takes a knee. He threw 2 touchdown passes, one to Marvin Jones Jr. from about 30 to 40 yards, and then a 2-yard touchdown reception by Amir Abdullah. 299 total passing yards by Stafford, 21 of 30. Those are the numbers that I remember from Matthew Stafford. He did a fantastic job, and his offense wasn't too shabby. They put up close to 30, and their defense got bailed out. Both teams coughed up the ball by fumble. One fumble lost each. One of them recovered by the Lions for a touchdown.
Yeah, it was a bad snap to Trubisky. It was a miscommunication. Cody Whitehair, who is the Bears center, has had a propensity for bad snaps in his young career. And that one comes back to bite the Bears, but really it was just a struggle of two teams that didn't seem like they wanted to win the game. The Bears came out hot and took a 10-0 lead, and it looked like a replay of the last game that the Lions had against the Browns, where they just seemed like they were caught unawares that the game was starting. But then it started to settle in, and Stafford started to go to work. The one thing that I can take away from this is, for some reason, the Lions seemed to think that they needed to run the ball a lot in that first half, and it didn't work to their favor. So they started to throw the ball a lot more and expose the coverage problems that Chicago Bears have. And then they get to the second half and started to run the game again and almost ran themselves out of a victory. So it was a win for the Lions. They go to 7-3. And the Bears go down to 3-7. But that said, it was the Lions go to 6-4. But it just didn't look like anybody wanted to win this game. But the Bears, with a relatively young offense, was able to move the ball at times effectively against Detroit. But Detroit was his own worst enemy. Letting Trubisky getting a fourth down conversion on their last drive. 4th and 13, he scrambles 19 yards. I mean, that's just unacceptable if you're a defense. You know that they have to get downfield, and you can't catch the guy on 4th and 13. Just poor defense there, but they get bailed out because Connor Barth shanks a 46-yard field goal, and they come away with the victory. But that's the kind of performance that, when you look at it, it's a bad team, the Bears. They're not a very good football team, yet they struggled to win that game on the road. And they're going to have the Vikings coming in on Thanksgiving. The Vikings with a very good performance this week against the Rams, who had a really good thing going offensively.
The LA Rams, that is.
The LA Rams, they Minnesota shut them down and really did a nice job there and came away with the victory. So it really sets up this tilt on Thanksgiving as the de facto NFC North Championship game, because the Vikings were able to win that game. They'd have firm command of the division with only 3 games left, with only 5 games left. And they would really have to falter down the stretch to lose that position to the Lions. So a big game on Thanksgiving, which is what the TV networks like. And the Lions will have to do enough on a short week and see if they can pull out the victory at home, where they have not performed well this season. Another one of those teams that, strangely enough, on the road is almost better than they are at home. Now, I know that doesn't get reflected sometimes in the win-loss column, but boy, the Lions at home have been severely disappointing in their performances, whereas on the road, save today, they've been pretty solid.
They're 4-1 on the road and 2-3 at home at Ford Field are the Lions. The Vikings 5-1 at home at US Bank Stadium, 3-1 on the road. They're just too darn good this year in the NFC Nuke North. They continue to lead the NFC Nuke North. The Packers now in 3rd place at 5-5 after getting blanked by the Baltimore Ravens at Lambeau Field, 23-0. Yeah, they can keep making the excuse of Aaron Rodgers being out for the rest of the season with a broken collarbone the rest of the regular season. That's what one of my coworkers at Ruby Tuesday, Dan, told me that if the Packers make the playoffs this year, then they could get Aaron Rodgers back, which is not possible because the Packers are 5-5. They're probably going to fall out of playoff contention by regular season's end.
Yeah, if you're going to play like that at home, don't worry about the playoffs because the Ravens are terrible. But oh my gosh, you get blanked by them at home and just play that way.
At Lambeau Field, what an embarrassment!
Yeah, I mean Brett Hundley was terrible, and the offense just didn't go anywhere. Defensively, I thought the Packers played okay. But when your team's not scoring any points, it doesn't really matter how good your defense is playing. They can't compete with that. They're not going to shut out the Ravens. And, for the Packers this year, I think this is kind of chalked this one up to a lost year. And at this point, they're just going to have to hope for a decent draft pick and try to pick up the pieces and go into next season.
I suggest they draft a better backup quarterback than Brett Hundley.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to find somebody because Aaron Rodgers isn't going to be getting any younger.
No, he's getting older.
Yeah, and you've got to find somebody that's not Brett Hundley. It may not be the first round. I don't think you take your backup in the first round at all. But boy, Brett Hundley just really showing the level of ineffectiveness today. Three interceptions. He had over 240 yards passing, but boy, just nothing that counted. And they couldn't move across the street running the ball very well. So, the Packers just had a good game today, and falling to 5-5, it's going to be tough for them to fight their way back into the playoff hunt because I don't see them winning 4 more games.
No. We'll see Aaron Rodgers next year in 2018. That's the only possibility that we're looking at.
Yeah, I mean, there's no reason to rush him back for anything at this point because they're going to be, by the time he's even able to be coming back, which is the last 2 weeks of the season, they'll be out of the race and there won't be any reason for him to be played.
No. Taking out the LA Rams, by the way, who lost to those Minnesota Vikings. Let me see. Let me load it up. The Los Angeles Rams are 7-3. That's the team. That's a team that the Vikings beat at US Bank Stadium. Both teams were 7-2 going into that game. So the Lions are going to have their hands full at home. They have to play better than they did against the Pittsburgh Steelers. They have to play better at home against than they did at home against the Atlanta Falcons. Well, the defending Super Bowl champions, the Falcons, are 5-4, third place in the NFC South.
Yeah, and I think the one thing that you look at when you're talking about the Lions and how they play at home, saw an interesting stat today. Scoring margin, which basically you take the scores that you had and take the opponent's scores, match those together, and whatever the differential is what you are. They were no better than 13th in the first 3 quarters. But in the fourth quarter, they are the NFL's best team in scoring differential. And they were plus 57 going into today. And that kind of says 2 things. Number one, they are a team that if they are close to you in the third quarter that you have to be careful of. But also shows how poorly that they have started in most of their games this year. I mean, it's just a recurring theme. They were down 10-0 to the Browns early last week. They were down 10-0 to the Bears this week. They just don't have good starts. And in the NFL, when you're playing teams in the later part of the season that are as good or better than you, you can't be going down 10-0, regardless if you're going against some of the teams that are bad, like Chicago and Cleveland. That's not something that you can fight back from every week in and week out. And it's the same thing that happened last year. They would get down, they would come back, and they'd magically win the game. Well, that isn't happening as much this year. And that's the kind of stuff that it starts to wear on a defense because they have to keep the team close. It wears on your offense too because you can't do exactly what you want to game plan wise if you're always playing from behind. So it's a tough spot, and I just don't think the Lions, when you're looking at how they can perform over the rest of the regular season, they keep going down 10, 13, nothing, or 17, 10, or whatever it is in the first halves. They're not going to win all those games, and that's not a recipe for success. So far, they've dodged the bullet because they've played some bad teams. They don't have a lot of good teams ahead of them on their schedule, other than the Vikings. But boy, I mean, you can't be starting like that every single game almost and expect to win a lot of those football games.
No, you can't expect to win. You got to start off a lot better than that, especially on offense.
Because their defense has played okay this year. I mean, there's been times where they've been bad, but that's what happens in an NFL season. Sometimes you're going to look bad, but I mean, consistently the offense starts like they don't know that the game is underway. I mean, the first 2-3 series against the Bears today, I mean, they just had no idea what they were doing. I mean, really, they tried to establish the run against a team that is terrible against the pass. Why wouldn't you come out throwing? Their defensive secondary isn't that great. I mean, it's okay, but it's littered with guys that you can get matchups on, as Marvin Jones showed, and you can have some success. And they just refused. Jim Bob Cooter refused to throw the ball until it was absolutely necessary. And I understand that part of that is because Matt Stafford's banged around. He got banged around more today because their offensive line in pass pro, for some mystifying reason, isn't very good. But again, you have to go with what you are good at. And finally, in the second and third quarters, they were starting to throw the ball and had success. And it just doesn't make sense. I mean, you can run the ball once in a while just to mix things up. But the Lions don't have a lot invested in their run game. I mean, Amir Abdullah is their first-round pick from a couple of years ago. Other than that, there's not a whole lot of guys that I need to see run the football a lot. I mean, they had Jamal Agnew in at running back today, and then he got hurt, so he had to lead the game for a brief minute. But, I mean, it's amazing to me that you look at a team like the Lions who, yes, I know that they like to throw the football, and you can get caught in that trap as well. But holy cow, when you're playing a team such as the Bears, and I know them, yeah, I'm a fan of the Bears, and they're not any good this year, but you can get matchups against their defensive secondary, and all you have to do is hold on for a little bit. You don't have to run deep routes against them. They're not very good in mid-range routes, and it took Jim Bob Cooter a full quarter and a half to figure that out. I mean, that was mind-boggling to me, but they ended up coming up with the victory. Like I said, they have a pretty easy schedule when you talk about in terms of wins and losses of their opponents down the stretch, but this game against the Vikings is going to be key because the Vikings played very well on defense today against the Rams, only gave up one first-quarter touchdown and then shut them out the rest of the way. And you're going to be playing a defense that, when they played the Vikings before, the one reason that the Lions won was because of the Minnesota Vikings turnovers. They took 11 points off of turnovers in that game, which they won 14-7. You might not get those turnovers again. You're going to have to find a way to win without the other team making mistakes. And so far, the Lions, when they've played a team that has limited their mistakes, they haven't been able to win.
No. I'm going to predict the Vikings to win 27-20.
Well, it should be another one-possession game. These teams were closely matched in the first bit. Now, Minnesota's got a little bit more rhythm offensively. Case Keenum entrenched in that starting quarterback spot. He does just enough to win the game. They've run the ball effectively. Dalvin Cook went out with that injury. Now they have Jerick McKinnon and Latavius Murray had a couple of touchdowns today. But offensively, they're still not that good. They do just enough, like I said, to win the game. Defensively is where their bread is buttered. I'm going to predict that Detroit loses this game. I don't know if I'm going to go with the 27-20. I think this game's a little bit more defensive, just because of the short turnaround. And those games are typically a little bit more close to the vest as far as offenses go. I'm going to go with the Vikings 20 and the Lions 17.
That's what I was assuming. So, there's The Lions, granted, being 3-0 against the NFC Nuke North, they're probably going to suffer their first NFC Nuke North loss of the season on Thanksgiving, unfortunately. So, we transition from football to pro basketball.
Left sideline, 3, and he answers.
Well, the Pistons only settle for 1 on the road. They lose 99-95 at the Milwaukee Bucks. And then they blow a 22-point lead with 5:32 left in the third quarter and lose 107-100 at the Indiana Pacers, which was unacceptable in a game where Andre Drummond didn't produce. Andre Drummond apparently didn't produce in the Milwaukee game either. Then they go to the Minnesota game. He finished strong, came up with 20 points on 4 of 5, including 4 or 5 free throw shooting and 16 rebounds. The Pistons beat the Timberwolves 197 to sweep the season series.
Well, they were down at halftime, which was surprising. They were down by 4, but and they were down going into the fourth quarter as well. So they didn't win a single quarter until that fourth quarter where they outscored the Timberwolves by 12. Going back to the Pacers game, Steven Van Gundy, boy, he left his bench out there for too long. They pulled the reins back when they were up 22, which is understandable, but he reacted way too late to get his starters back into that game. And by that time, momentum clearly on Indiana's side. They ended up carrying that victory, outscoring the Pistons by 29 from that 5:32 mark. So that tells you how bad the offense was. And defensively for the Pistons, just not a very good showing by the second unit. And then they come back tonight playing a pretty good Timberwolves team. And for 3 quarters, we're down. They were down by, they were down by 9 to go into the fourth quarter. And then defensively turned on the Jets. Offensively started to make some shots, and they ended up pulling ahead and win the game by 3. 197 against the Timberwolves squad that right now is 10-6. They came into the game 10-5, just as the Pistons did. So pretty good teams going at it. And I think that the Pistons really got to that fourth quarter staring down the barrel of another loss and turned on the Jets, so to speak, and were able to come out with a victory. Andre Drummond had 20 points and 16 boards, so a better performance for him offensively. He's been getting the rebounding down, but offensively, he hasn't been able to show much the last couple of games when they lost to the Bucks and the Pacers. And for him to go for 20 points and lead the team was heartening. The rest of the offense really came from Avery Bradley and Tobias Harris. And defensively, they just played a much better the fourth quarter than they had for the entirety of the game. And Timberwolves just didn't have an answer on the other end, and they couldn't narrow the gap couldn't stop the bleeding, I should say. And they ended up losing that game after being up 9 going into the fourth quarter. So not a great win, or not a great loss for the Timberwolves, but a very good win for the Pistons.
Mm-hmm. The Timberwolves game was the first of the back-to-back set. They're home against the Cleveland Cavaliers, the defending Eastern Conference champions, at Little Caesars Arena Monday at 7. The Pistons are going to have a very good game, a division rival in the Cleveland Cavaliers. The Pistons obviously have a better record than them.
Yeah, it's going to be tough, though. You have a back-to-back break coming home, and they're probably getting home very late. They're probably not going to be well-rested. You're playing a Cavaliers team, like you said, that's kind of a wounded animal right now. It's going to be difficult for the Pistons, but we'll see what kind of team they have tomorrow night, because that's the type of game that you need to come out and win if you're going to be considered an elite team in the National Basketball Association. Those are the type of games that the schedule calls for you to play back-to-back. Unfortunately, that's part of the game sometimes, and the Pistons are going to come out tomorrow and have their hands full with the Cavaliers. It'll be interesting to see what the rotation is from Stan Van Gundy, having played last night, see if Marjanovic makes it into the game a little bit, and see some other guys.
Yeah, Boban's a fresh player. Boban's a fresh player.
I think that with the back-to-back, you'd hope that Stan Van Gundy is a little bit more liberal in his substitutions, simply because they're going to have some guys that are going to be dragging. So we'll see how that goes. But that's the type of game you got to win if you want to be at the top of the conference.
Yeah. And if they don't play Boban Marjanovic, if Stan Van Gundy doesn't play Boban Marjanovic at all against the Cleveland Cavaliers, and instead just makes the excuse that the Pistons were tired, then I will point the finger. And then as good of a human being Stan Van Gundy is, only as a head coach am I going to point the finger at Stan Van Gundy for not playing a fresh Boban Marjanovic.
Yeah, you would think, boy, that's one of the games that if you were going to bring him in, that would be one of the games to do so. Because you've been riding Andre Drummond pretty hard. Eric Moreland's played some minutes, but you're in a situation where it's a back-to-back. You would hope that maybe getting some fresh guys out there would help them, but we'll see how the game goes, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Then they're at the Oklahoma City Thunder Friday at 8. They go back on the road and play the Thunder. Checking on the NBA standings here, I'm checking out the Thunder's record right now. The Thunder. The Oklahoma City Thunder, 9th place, a tie for 8th place with the Memphis Grizzlies, 7-8.
Well, they're 2-7 in their own conference, which tells you that they've feasted on Eastern Conference opposition to this point. The one thing that you can say about the Thunder is that they've been good at home, 5-2, but they've been pretty poor on the road at 2-6. So playing at home is going to be a distinct advantage for them. The one thing the Pistons will have is some actual rest, having 3 days of rest before heading into that game against the Thunder. And right now, the game ahead of them is the Cavaliers, but looking forward to that one as well. Should be a pretty good game between two teams that are going to obviously need a win. The Pistons to stay afloat at the top of the Central Division, and the Thunder just to keep pace in the West.
Yep. Those are the two games this upcoming week that we are looking forward to. That's Pistons. Now we transition to Red Wings hockey.
That was a result for them tonight as far as wins and losses. They were 2-1 early in the third.
Athanasiou scored a breakaway goal.
Let Colorado get back. Yeah, let Colorado back in the game, scoring a tying goal to tie it at 3, and then Nathan McKinnon getting the overtime winner. So the Red Wings get the loser's point in overtime, but they ended up losing out on 2 points that they could have had with a win. Andreas Athanasiou, as you mentioned, with the big breakaway goal to put ahead 2-1. Cronwall getting his first goal, of the season.
On the power play.
On the power play, no less, right?
My goodness.
But some defensive breakdowns
Right out of
them, and Colorado, who's not a great team, but they were able to drag out 2 points from Little Caesars Arena today.
The Avalanche are not as terrible as they were last year. They ended up with the worst record in the NHL last season. They're somewhat better than that thus far right now this season. The Red Wings' defense just typically bad. They allowed 2 late goals, blow a 3-1 lead. Nothing Jimmy Howard can do. His own defense screen him with dragging a whole bunch of traffic in front of him, and then Nathan McKinnon scored the overtime goal in the 3-on-3 overtime frame, and the Avs come up with a 4-3 overtime victory. Red Wings still take 5 of 6 points in their 3-game homestand. They smashed the Flames 8-2. Luke Witkowski suspended 10 games for re-entering the ice surface after getting a game misconduct in a brawl against those Flames. We've discussed this last week on Talk Shoe in the in an in-game chat, obviously, which was supposed to be a post-game, but Luke Witkowski, that was a no-brainer. You can't re-enter the ice. We're broadcasting this on Spreaker now, additionally, and let the Spreaker listeners know about this. that you cannot re-enter the ice after getting a game misconduct. Otherwise, if you do, you're going to get an automatic 10-game suspension, according to NHL Rule 70.6. Then they beat the Buffalo Sabres 3-1. The Sabres didn't, in the last 2 minutes of regulation, decided not to pull Robin Lehner for an extra skater. I don't know.
Curious about that one. Dan Bilesma choosing not to pull the goaltender ended up haunting them as Detroit was able to pull out the victory. But boy, you'd think that they'd have to pull the goalie, and I was watching that game on replay and thinking, okay, they're gonna pull him, and they just never really were able to get control and any momentum in the offensive zone to be able to do that. But even at that point, sometimes you just have to do what it takes to win, and a lot of coaches will pull them earlier than that. They chose to not do that, but by the time they were able to, there just wasn't any way for them to get back into the hockey game. So Detroit with a win there against Buffalo, but then tonight kind of running out of gas in that third period and ending up losing the game in overtime and giving up a 3-1 lead. And as you said, defensively, especially the power play goal by Yakupov, Howard screened. It was not something that they drew up on the penalty kill chalkboard, but it is a point. They'll take that, and now they'll head off on another small road trip, it looks like. And then
they're playing the Edmonton Oilers at home Wednesday.
Right. They forgot about they have the Edmonton Oilers at home, that looks like, after that. So
the Oilers are a bad team. The Red Wings blanked them at Rogers Place 4-0 like 2 or 3 Sundays ago.
Yeah, they did, and the Oilers just have not been able to get things going. They're a young team, and people saw them last year getting into the playoffs. They thought that was a stepping stone, kind of like the Toronto Maple Leafs were doing. But so far, those teams headed in completely opposite directions. Toronto still one of the better teams in the Eastern Conference, and the Edmonton Oilers, boy, just not playing well at all this season so far. And I think that the Oilers coming in to play the Red Wings on Wednesday, they're going to have a game the night before against St. Louis. So if you're the Red Wings, a chance to play a team again on a back-to-back game where you're going to have some rest. The other team isn't. There's not a lot of excuses for you to come out flat in that one.
That's on the day before Thanksgiving.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And that's a chance for the Red Wings to take 7 of 8 in their 4-game homestand before they head to Madison Square Garden and play the Rangers, New York, Friday at 7, Black Friday, and then they're back home against the New Jersey Devils to start another homestand Saturday at 7. Then on Tuesday the 28th, they're home against the Los Angeles Kings, and then they're home against the lowly Montreal Canadiens Thursday the 30th at 7:30. To start a home and home set. Saturday they're in Montreal at 7.
Yeah, Canadians are brutal. You got to get some points there. And then you have the Rangers and the Devils. The Devils, I watched them get waxed today by Winnipeg. Winnipeg scoring, I think, 5 in the second period to blow that one open. So you're playing some teams that you should be able to get some points against if you're the Red Wings. Again, not the teams that are above you. And what you have to do is you have to beat the teams that aren't as good as you. And that's how you get into the playoffs, is you beat the teams that are below you and hopefully have some mixed results against some of the good teams like Washington, Toronto, and Tampa Bay, Pittsburgh in there included, and see if you can get enough points. But right now, Detroit just above 500. They're 10-8-3.
Yeah.
Nobody that we
just a little below 500 actually.
I mean, they wouldn't be at this point. We didn't predict them to be at this point of the season, so a little bit of a pleasant surprise. But again, it's a long season. One thing for the Detroit Red Wings is they haven't had any major injuries up front, which has helped them defensively. They've struggled through some injuries, but their defense score really wasn't that great to start with. So we'll see what happens. And if you look into the schedule on paper, boy, it sets up for the Red Wings to make some hay while the sun is up and get some points against some teams that aren't playing very well right now.
Yeah, and the only thing that bothers me about all this is the Red Wings are desperately trying to save Ken Holland's job.
Are you kidding me?
Ken Holland continues to sign more older players to block the prospects from entering the NHL, not giving the prospects a chance, and in other words, trading the prospects for more washed-up veterans, like they did with David Legwand and Eric Cole and Brad Richards and Franz Nielsen.
It'll be interesting to see what happens.
Steve
If
Ott.
they're in the playoffs.
Thomas
If they're in the playoff race come February, there's going to be some interesting things to happen, because you have some guys that you look at Andreas Athanasiou. He's due for another contract. Are they going to try to keep him after all the acrimony they had with his contract earlier this year? You have other guys that are impending free agents. You have guys that are possibly on their last legs. It's going to be an interesting season for the Red Wings, because if you're not in the playoff race like they weren't last year, then you definitely have to try to make trades that are going to help you in the long run. And that said, if you're barely in the playoff race, if you're hovering around the wild card, do you forfeit what could be another decent draft pick in a very deep draft for another run at the playoffs? Now, we know what Ken Holland's MO is. Of course he will, because that's what he does to try to save his job.
That's the point.
But if you're thinking, and you're looking at that team, this is not a Stanley Cup winning team, so you have to make those choices. Whereas, even though you might be in the playoff race, you have to be a seller if you're the Red Wings, simply because there's not a future in you getting into the playoffs this year, because they are not good enough to beat all of those teams in the East and make it to the Stanley Cup Finals. So I still think they have to be in selling mode, but we'll see what those later games and all that progress will bring when we get to that point.
Mm-hmm. So that actually brings me to one other thing outside the Red Wings, but still in the league. Bettman and the NBA's Houston Rockets owner have been discussing an expansion team in the NHL in Houston, which would complete the picture in the Central Division.
Yeah, I mean, these are preliminary talks. That said, I think it makes perfect sense for the league. It just has to make sense for the city of Houston. They've already got the arena, so they don't need to spend a bunch of money to build a brand new arena. So they've already got that in place. It just really depends on if they can get the dollars to pay for the expansion fees, and for the Houston Rockets owner, who just bought the team recently, if he's looking to expend some more capital and bring an NHL team to Houston, I don't think the NHL would have any problem with it. As you mentioned, they need one more team to solidify that Western Conference and get another team into the Central to make it 8 teams apiece in each division. And looking at how the Las Vegas Golden Knights have played so far, there's not really a fear of them being incompetent or without talent. But that said, they have to go through their due diligence, and if it happens, I think it would be supported by the league, because it makes sense location-wise and also numbers-wise. And it's really kind of a ready-made situation with the arena already there and a strong fan base for both the Rockets and other professional sports teams in that area.
Oh, yeah. I cannot wait for that. So with that being said, that's episode 291. No 5 questions and no what's your grade, because I don't have anything for them, unfortunately. But it's been a good almost 90-minute episode. Before we sign off, we want to remind everyone to share this episode and our entire podcast on social media and have their friends share that as well, because we want to tell them that the Michigan Sports Truth Podcast is boosting its posts of each episode from Spreaker on its Facebook page and searching for a wider local audience that is fans of sports and local advertising sponsors. If anyone has a local business in the state of Michigan that has a passion for sports and is interested in sponsoring this podcast, send our Facebook page a message. Buck, thanks very much. We'll talk again Sunday for episode 292 at 10 p.m.
Yes, sir.
So I'm Taylor Phillips. Follow me on Twitter at DT2Phillips and Bug Geno at Bug Geno the Third, 3 eyes for Roman numerals, and like and share the Michigan Sports Truth Facebook page. We'll talk to you next week on episode 292. Thanks very much for listening, downloading, and sharing. TTFN, ta-ta for now.
Oh, that's okay.
Mission complete.